The My Lai Massacre took place on March 16, 1968 during the Vietnam War when US troops commanded by Captain Ernest Medina entered a hamlet expecting to fight the Viet Cong's 48th Battalion, which was not there. The area had been known for booby traps and guerrilla activity, and Task Force Barker had surrounded the village to prevent anyone from fleeing. The mission was to destroy the settlement and its people. Once inside, soldiers began killing civilians, continuing even after it was clear no enemies were present. Mostly women, children, and elderly men were rounded up and executed with automatic weapons, bayonets, and grenades. Homes were burned, livestock killed, women assaulted, and bodies mutilated. Between 347 and 504 civilians lost their lives. This was initially reported as a successful battle against the Viet Cong and covered up in reports. Eventually, 26 soldiers faced charges, but only Lieutenant William Kelly Jr. was convicted of 22 murders and served 3 years of house arrest. The Tokyo firebombing was a series of US air raids in 1944-45 led by General Curtis LeMay during the final stages of World War II. With the new B-29 Superfortress bombers able to reach Japan, initial raids caused little damage, leading the US to adopt low-altitude, nighttime attacks using incendiary weapons. Each bomber carried tons of napalm bombs, filled with incendiary gel that clung to surfaces and burned at extreme temperatures. On the night of March 9, 1945, during Operation Meeting House, over 300 B-29s dropped 2,000 tons of incendiaries on Tokyo, deliberately targeting civilian areas. Strong winds spread the flames, creating a firestorm that reached up to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Entire neighborhoods were consumed, shelters provided no protection, and thousands of civilians suffocated or burned alive. The attack destroyed 16 square miles of the city, killed around 100,000 people, and left over 1 million homeless, making it the deadliest air raid in history. The Abu Ghraib Scandal broke during the Iraq War when photographs surfaced showing US soldiers abusing detainees inside the prison, run by the Army's Military Police Brigade. Prisoners in cell blocks 1A and 1B were subjected to torture, beatings, sexual humiliation, stress positions, sleep deprivation, dog attacks, violation, and even post-mortem desecration. Most detainees at Abu Ghraib were civilians with no ties to armed groups, according to the Red Cross. The US also faced criticism for keeping the facility in a combat zone, especially after 36 detainees died during mortar attacks. While the Bush administration insisted the abuse was the work of a few rogue soldiers, evidence pointed to a broader pattern of mistreatment across Iraq, Afghanistan, and Guantanamo. Between 2004 and 2006, 11 low-ranking soldiers were convicted and 17 personnel removed from duty. President George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld issued apologies but downplayed the scope of the crimes. Further leaks revealed continued beatings, forced nudity, and fatalities in custody. Abu Ghraib was finally closed in 2014 after years of global outrage. The Wounded Knee Massacre took place on December 29, 1890, when the US 7th Cavalry under Colonel James W. Forsyth surrounded a Lakota camp at Wounded Knee Creek on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. The US Army was ordered to control the Sioux and stop the Independence Ghost Dance movement, seen as a threat to US control. The soldiers were attempting to disarm about 120 Lakota men in fear of Native resistance. The standoff turned violent when deaf tribesman Black Coyote resisted giving up his rifle, which discharged and triggered the US troops to open fire. Within an hour, between 250 and 300 Lakota men, women, and children were shot. Survivors fleeing to a ravine were chased on horseback and slaughtered. Some wounded were executed. Most of the victims were unarmed. Despite the scale of the massacre, the US Army awarded Medals of Honor to 19 soldiers involved. The Kandahar Massacre occurred on March 11, 2012, when US Army Staff Sergeant Robert Bales carried out a nighttime attack on 2 villages in Afghanistan's Panjwai district. Wearing night vision gear and disguised in traditional Afghan clothing, he entered homes and murdered 16 civilians, including 9 children and several women, while wounding 6 others. 11 members of one family were executed, their bodies shot, stabbed, and burned. Witnesses described children dragged by their hair and shot, and an entire household reduced to ashes. The fatalities came at a time of high tension between Afghans and US forces, following incidents such as the burning of Korans at Bagram Air Base and videos of Marines desecrating Taliban corpses. The massacre sparked outrage, with President Hamid Karzai calling it intentional murder and demanding US forces withdraw from villages. Bales later pleaded guilty to 16 counts of murder to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 were the only nuclear attacks ever carried out in warfare. On the 6th of August, the United States dropped the little boy bomb on Hiroshima, followed by the fat man bomb on Nagasaki on August 9th. The nuclear fireballs vaporized everything nearby, with blast waves obliterating reinforced concrete buildings within 800 meters and leveling most residential and commercial structures within 1.7 kilometers. Fatalities in the immediate zones approached 100%. Around 70 to 80,000 people died instantly in Hiroshima, with tens of thousands more killed in Nagasaki, the majority being civilians. Survivors suffered severe burns, injuries, and radiation poisoning, with widespread fires creating firestorms that consumed entire neighborhoods. Long-term effects included elevated cancer rates and other illnesses caused by radiation exposure. The devastation and massive civilian death toll, between 150,000 to 246,000, played a central role in Japan's surrender, marking the end of World War II. No warning was given despite US knowledge of the bomb's scale. The Mozote Massacre took place in December 1981 when El Salvador's US-trained and funded Adler Cattle Battalion carried out Operation Rescue, aimed at eliminating suspected guerrilla presence in northern Morazan. Despite El Mozote being a neutral, largely evangelical village whose residents had been assured safety, soldiers executed more than 800 civilians. Men were interrogated, tortured, and shot. Women and girls were violated before being killed, and children were slaughtered, with the village then burned to the ground. For years, Salvadoran authorities and US officials dismissed the reports as guerrilla propaganda, but UN-backed exhumations in 1992 confirmed the systematic mass executions and deliberate targeting of civilians. The US later acknowledged errors in its handling of the case, while the Salvadoran government issued formal apologies. The Gun Ri Massacre happened between July 26th and 29th, 1950, when US forces killed hundreds of South Korean refugees near the village of Ri during the early stages of the Korean War. As US and South Korean troops retreated from North Korean advances, American commanders issued orders to stop and fire on approaching civilians, suspected of being North Korean infiltrators. Soldiers of the 7th Cavalry Regiment funneled villagers onto rail tracks and attacked them with machine guns, rifles, mortars, and artillery. Most of the estimated 200 to 400 victims were women and children. The refugees ran and took shelter inside a tunnel underneath the railroad bridge, where they came under non-stop machine gun fire from US forces, and survivors were forced to pile up corpses as barricades and dig into the ground to hide. Any escape attempts were met with gunfire. The incident remained largely unknown outside Korea until a 1999 report corroborated survivors' accounts and uncovered declassified orders. A 2001 US Army inquiry characterized the incident as unintended consequences of war, offering no apology. The Tiger Force Atrocities. Tiger Force was a reconnaissance unit of the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam, active from November 1965 to 67. Organized by Major David Hackworth to out-guerrilla the guerrillas, the platoon operated with autonomy and minimal oversight, focusing on high body counts. Investigations decades later revealed that the unit committed extensive war crimes against civilians, numbering in the hundreds. During operations in the Songwe Valley and Operation Wheeler, the area was declared a free fire zone, and Tiger Force routinely tortured, violated, and executed prisoners, deliberately killed unarmed civilians, including elderly women and children, and even babies, mutilated corpses, and collected ears and scalps as trophies. Villages were burned and soldiers boasted of kills, often falsifying records to label civilians as enemy combatants. The extreme violence continued until November 1967, after which some members reported the crimes to military authorities. At least 18 members could have faced war crime charges, but no one was ever prosecuted. Tiger Force's atrocities remained largely hidden until 2002. The Haditha Massacre. On November 19, 2005, in Haditha, Iraq, a US Marine convoy was hit by an improvised explosive device, killing Lance Corporal Miguel Terrazas and injuring 2 others. In retaliation, US Marines shot 5 unarmed men in nearby taxi and then moved through 4 homes, killing 19 more civilians, including women and children, using grenades and close-range rifle fire. Victims were struck multiple times in the head and chest. Initially covered up as an insurgent attack, a 2006 Time magazine expose revealed the truth. The Marine Corps later paid $38,000 to families of 15 victims, and 8 Marines were charged in 2006. In the end, only Sergeant Frank Vaturik was punished, pleading guilty in 2012 to negligent dereliction of duty, receiving a rank reduction and pay cut, but no jail time. The Balangiga Massacre. On September 28, 1901, Filipino resistance fighters in Balangiga, Samar, ambushed US troops during the Philippine-American War, killing 48 soldiers. The attack, fueled by resentment of US occupation, prompted a brutal retaliation. US General Jacob H. Smith was ordered to turn Samar into a howling wilderness, instructing troops to kill everyone over the age of 10. The campaign destroyed over 250 homes, killed livestock, and caused the deaths of 2,000 to 50,000 civilians. Prisoners were tortured and entire towns were emptied as families fled to the mountains. The retaliation sparked outrage in the United States. General Smith was court-martialed and forced to retire in disgrace, while General Waller was acquitted, despite acknowledging executions and the use of the water cure during interrogations. Early American accounts framed the Filipino attack as the massacre, but historians now consider the mass killings during US retaliation as the true war crime. The Moro Crater Massacre, or the Battle of Batdaho, occurred in 1906 during the Moro Rebellion in the southern Philippines. Following the US takeover after the Spanish-American War, American forces sought to extend control over the indigenous Moro people, who resisted foreign rule. Many took refuge atop the dormant volcano Batdaho, seeking safety rather than conflict. On March 7th, US forces under Colonel Joseph Wilson Duncan assaulted the crater, which was populated by 1,000 villagers. Despite the village's minimal armament, American troops used overwhelming firepower, including naval bombardment. As a result, over 800 to 900 people died, with US soldiers later posing beside the corpses. Although reported as a military engagement, the scale of violence and disproportionate casualties make the so-called battle widely recognized as a massacre. Operation Speedy Express was a US campaign in the Mekong Delta from December 1968 to May 1969 by the Army's 9th Infantry Division under General Julian Ewell. Intended to cut the Viet Cong supply lines and deny them sanctuary, the operation deployed 8,000 infantry, artillery, helicopter gunships, and thousands of airstrikes. The US Army reported over 10,800 enemy killed, but recovered fewer than 750 weapons, which led to suspicion. Later reviews estimated 5,000 to 7,000 civilians may have been among the dead. Commanders, driven by body count metrics, pressured troops to produce results, creating a pattern where civilians in free fire zones were routinely targeted. Ewell encouraged this brute force approach, earning the nickname the Butcher of the Delta, which he reportedly accepted with pride. The Mahmudiyah Atrocities took place during the Iraq War on March 12, 2006, when 5 US Army soldiers from the 502nd Infantry Regiment entered the home of the Al-Janabi family. The soldiers separated the family, with Private Stephen D. Green murdering the parents and a 6-year-old daughter, while Specialists Paul E. Cortez and James P. Barker assaulted and violated 14-year-old Abir Kazim Hamza Al-Janabi. Green then assaulted her as well, shot her in the head and set her body on fire before the group staged a scene with an AK-47 and returned to base to celebrate. Green and his accomplices alleged that the massacre had been perpetrated by Sunni insurgents. Because Green had already been discharged for mental health issues before the crime came to light, he was convicted and sentenced to life without parole. Cortez Barker and Jesse V. Spielman pleaded guilty and received 100 years. Another soldier who did not directly participate but was aware of the plan received 27 months and a dishonorable discharge. Abir's younger brothers, aged 9 and 11, were at school at the time and orphaned by the event. The Bear River Massacre took place on January 29, 1863, when about 200 US soldiers under Colonel Patrick Connor attacked a Shoshone winter encampment in Idaho, killing between 250 and 400 men, women, and children. Reports stated that Connor gave the order to kill everything. The soldiers destroyed 70 lodges and food stores while assaulting Shoshone women. Later, Connor was promoted for the attack. The Sand Creek Massacre took place on November 29, 1864, during the American Indian Wars, when Colonel John Chivington led Colorado troops in an attack on a largely peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho village that had been camped under U.S. assurances of safety. Between 150 and 230 people lost their lives, most of them women and children. Soldiers used rifles and howitzers while carrying out widespread mutilation and desecration of bodies. The massacre was officially condemned as a foul and dastardly act, but Chivington avoided punishment and was even considered for a medal. Operation Phantom Fury, or the Second Battle of Fallujah, began on November 7, 2004 and lasted 6 weeks, becoming the bloodiest battle of the Iraq War. Over 10,000 US-led troops attacked the city after blocking men of fighting age from leaving, while tens of thousands of civilians, including women and children, remained trapped. The assault leveled 70% of the city, restricted access to humanitarian groups, and reportedly used hunger and thirst as weapons against the population, while snipers allegedly targeted civilians. The Red Cross initially estimated around 800 civilian deaths, while Iraqi medical groups later put the toll up to 6,000. US forces employed white phosphorus shells, which caused deep chemical burns that melted flesh, alongside depleted uranium munitions that left behind radioactive dust. In the years after the battle, Fallujah saw massive spikes in cancer, infant mortality, and birth defects.